Today we're thrilled to present 5 cloud catastrophes and how to avoid them. With regard to machine identities and machine identity protection, particularly in cloud environments, how is digital transformation creating new security needs in cloud environments? Again, especially relative to machine identities and their protection. We're going to outline what we call the 5 key cloud catastrophes, and that's a question of both strategic planning as well as how you tactically integrate with TPP or any method that you have for managing your machine identities in cloud environments. The first issue is lack of visibility. As you push workloads into clouds, do you know where those certificates are? Do you know where they're deployed and what's in place there? It sort of exacerbates existing machine identity problems that we have. So how do we get visibility? We need visibility in the on-prem workloads, which is something that TPP does for you very well. And we have to assume that those workloads, depending on your corporate strategy, are moving to the cloud or they've already moved. And we need to provide this extensive real-time discovery that happens all the time, not just for your mission-critical systems that might be, load balancers managing your most critical customer-facing applications, but really start looking at all of them. And we need to implement a zero trust model, which means we can't inherit trust. We need to establish trust whenever we create or instantiate new infrastructure. You need to discover workloads in your key platforms. You need to discover the certificates that are related to those workloads as well, and keep an inventory of the application owners as well as the applications that are consuming those. Another key for visibility is just the whole notion of ephemeral workloads. We see workloads being built up and erased instantaneously. We see Terraform infrastructure being spun up and then torn down before their identities are even corroborated or tracked. So they're spun up, but we know that they're consuming identities. We're establishing TLS connections to them, but we have no way to manage the keys and certificates that are being used and consumed there. We're basically placing trust in the notion that that infrastructure is going to get destroyed or it's going to get eradicated. But the question is, what if it doesn't? What if it isn't? Or it uses a short-lived certificate, but the instances remain? So how do we monitor that? How do we maintain our visibility across those? Can we monitor instantiation of new infrastructure with, say, Terraform and get confirmation that it's no longer there, that certificates are no longer needed? We could actually revoke or remove certificates and get a sort of consistent inventory of what certificate issuance, creation, and usage actually looks like. Second problem, or problem 4, is lack of governance and policy. So it's sort of I call it the Lord of the Flies world, where really it's the wild, wild west. There's this growing movement now to maintain governance and regulatory control over the security configurations around our cloud environments, but a lack of us doing it. So there isn't really a really good overarching plan for it. A lot of organizations have looked at the needs to establish governance and policy, and the first thing they need to do is establish what's their methodology going to be, how are they going to use it. Then they need to integrate their core infrastructure, which is kind of where Venafi fits in, so that we could pull that information, allow them to assess it, and then look at what the actual risks are within that infrastructure, and then of course mitigate them, and then enable some sort of continuous governance. Third issue is unexpected cryptographic failures. So we tend to call that a cryptopocalypse, or we call them the need for cryptographic agility, and it's as important in cloud environments as it is in your on-prem environments. And we sometimes call this crypto agility, but the notion of crypto agility and the need to be agile to protect yourself against cryptographic vulnerabilities or failures, as well as CA failures, is a little bit more pronounced, I think, in cloud environments. You become a little bit more abstracted away from, you now have this whole other operational layer or pane in there, P-A-N-E, operational pane in there to negotiate between potential cryptographic failures, encryption vulnerabilities that you might be experiencing, as well as the CA. So crypto agility basically describes a way of implementing cryptography that ensures that when you do replace algorithms or you do an update on something, that you can do it without impacting the underlying application or the services. And this was important, I think, on-prem environments. It's especially important in cloud environments. The ability to find out what kind of encryption is being used, if there's a announced vulnerability, and to do an update, as well as what CAs have issued certificates. As you have development teams leveraging now multiple CAs, can I find unauthorized CAs with no notice to the security team. If somebody else is using an unauthorized CA, let's say that my policy, again, if you will, says that I use DigiCert and I use our private CA that we've structured, and I have one alternate, and somebody's using Let's Encrypt, can I find those certificates? Can I track those easily across different cloud environments? We're going to talk a little bit about identity and key sprawl. As you probably know, one of the options for the Trust Protection Platform is to not just manage TLS certificates, but also to add a module that inspects, provides visibility, intelligence, and automation for SSH keys. This is a fundamental part of the identity and key sprawl issue as well. So SSH key management, though, tends to be very, very sporadic. We have lots of recommendations out, like this one that came out of DevOps.com about how to use SSH keys in your organization to make it easier for your developers to access the sites and systems that they're working with. But there's a lack of overall management of those keys. So all of the tools that we're using in our environments can leverage SSH keys to manage them, but are we appropriately monitoring them? Organizations typically tend to underestimate their SSH key pairs based on our own experience and inventories by 10 times on-premise. They think they've got if they think they've got 4,000 SSH keys in their environment, it's not unheard of for them to have 3 or 4 million of them, because they of course accumulate over time and they never actually expire. For vendor lock-in, what we mean by this is primarily the notion that our customers require, whether it's technical flexibility or business flexibility, they need the ability to work between different cloud environments. 74-75% of all infrastructures and customers are leaning towards a hybrid cloud environment. That might mean multiple public cloud providers or any combination of them. That's got a really interesting aspect to it, which is that the way that those cloud providers manage responsibility, their shared responsibility matrix is going to be different in each case. It's almost always around access, engagement, and management. Those are the key things that are always the customer's responsibility. So why this matters is if you use a system for machine identity management across your entire organization, like TPP, that can be your system of record for determining what the rights are and permissions and how you're going to manage not only human identity, that aspect of it, but machine identities within your environments. That gives you the ability to have one consistent way that allows you to go, if the business requirements, and another thing about cloud platforms, obviously with cloud native computing, a lot of the functionality that's built can be leveraged by the developers in different ways. So if they need to deliver a certain kind of functionality or capability, well, if you have a system in place that manages those rights and responsibilities, heterogeneously is a big word, but basically means what we need to here, that it manages them across different cloud environments in the same way, that can take care of that for you.